Hi everyone, my name is Carter Fahey. I'm a senior in the Department of Classical Studies, and my project is called Per Oculi Antiquitatum, Reframing Modern Politics Through Ancient Art, and my advisor is Professor Stephanie Nelson in the Classics Department. For those of us who don't speak Latin in the room, Per Oculi Antiquitatum just means through the eyes of the ancients, which will make more sense as we continue. Just for a little bit of introduction and background, I grew up in an area where there was pretty extreme political hostility basically wherever I turned. The great, wonderful state of Ohio. I never quite understood why we can't seem to overcome these divisions, and that experience has really shaped how I think about the world. In my Keystone, I really wanted to explore these divisions and how we might overcome them, since the extreme hostility within the political system hinders both communication and problem solving. People can't have productive and meaningful conversations without taking a step back from their own ideas and considering others. So as a classics major, I spend most of my time taking on the role of the unbiased observer, as I like to call it. I try and look at multiple ancient events and literatures without bias and consider multiple perspectives and what it might have been like to live through these events. If we can implement this unbiased observer mindset when we're considering modern politics, we can take a step back from some of our political divisions and try and approach issues like COVID, climate change, police brutality, and election fraud with a fresh perspective and work together to find solutions. So to help facilitate this reframing, I've created a collection of 6 objects, such as the one displayed here, exploring modern politics through the lens of antiquity in order to allow viewers to interact with politics without the confrontational context of modernity. So think the classic artwork you see in museums, like these examples from the MFA, but with modern events worked in. These are all exhibited together alongside museum-like descriptions. Again, you can see one up at the top on the right there, to create an immersive experience that allows people to view politics in a new light. All right. So I spent a lot of time looking into political themes in ancient art and literature, as well as examining the relationships and similarities between modern and ancient politics. And I actually spent quite a bit of time creating these actual objects. So up on the screen here, we see a little peek into my process for a few of the pieces, as well as some of the notes and Attic Greek composition that features in some of the other works not featured in this presentation. So going on to some of the final pieces I actually ended up creating. On the top right here, we have a fresco that is modeled after Roman frescoes in Pompeii. So this depicts tensions between those wearing masks and those who don't, especially at the peak of the pandemic, so think mid-2020. And I really tried to incorporate COVID here without taking the viewer out of the historical context of the Roman art style. And one of the ways I did that, and one of the pieces of research throughout this whole project, was coming up with modern concepts that can still fit into the ancient world. So in this one, the face coverings are feasible and they could have been worn in the ancient world. On the bottom left, we have ostraca, which is just pottery shards inscribed with names, which they would have used to vote in the ancient world. And mine are inscribed with names of political candidates, such as Donald Trump and Joe Biden. So this really depicts political tensions during recent and current election cycles, as well as issues like election fraud. So this is actually the piece displayed here. It is a piece of red figure pottery that is actually created from papier mâché that addresses climate change and sea level rise. It shows an ancient ship encountering submerged ruins of the Statue of Liberty. So the design draws quite heavily from similar scenes on ancient red figure pottery. And on the second side, we see an ancient earth goddess, Gaia, defending herself from mankind and the effects of fossil fuels. There was a lot of research that went into making these pieces and the symbolism and imagery I used to make them feel as if they were things that could really be an organic response to events happening today without taking people out of the historical context. So in this example, the ship and sailors especially are modeled after ancient examples, but they are encountering a remnant of our civilization today. So the final piece I want to talk about today is this wax writing tablet. So these would have been used in the ancient world for everyday business writing and personal notes, and they would have been written on with a stylus. So they're reusable, they're kind of just like scratch paper. This piece in particular tackles the complexities of political finances and scandals, and it is in my own original Latin. If you do speak Latin, don't look too closely. And I did actually have to learn how to write in Latin cursive, which was not something I knew existed before this. So you learned something new. On the left, you can see an example of the museum description that accompanies each object. And these descriptions are actually really important to create a speculative context for each of these pieces and to create the observer perspective. So I've only talked about 4 of the 6 here. If you'd like to see the rest of the pieces I've created alongside their descriptions, they will all be displayed together at the reception afterward, so please feel free to stop by and ask questions about that. And I would love to hear people's reactions to everything displayed together. They haven't been seen by people like this before. And I would love to discuss each piece in further detail. Overall, I've been quite surprised by how many connections there are between modern and ancient politics and how relevant these ancient themes really can be. I think the project as a whole really speaks to the ways that classics and the humanities can help provide new perspective on modern issues, and more importantly, to help us understand our fellow humans, whether they are the ancient Romans living 2,000 years ago, or they are neighbors right next door. And I really hope this project can make a difference and spark meaningful conversation about today's political environment and help people reconsider modern issues by examining ancient history. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Hi, great presentation. I guess it was interesting you pointed out the similarities in ancient politics to modern ones, and I guess in talking about the humanities and everything, I guess if you could just reflect on how that shows that maybe how human nature and how consistent it is captured in art, be it ancient or modern interpretations, and just would be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the themes we see both in ancient art and modern art really are universal themes. We see a lot about love, but we also see a lot about violence, which does tend to be a typical part of human nature. So these connections can kind of fall by the wayside. Maybe when we're studying ancient history, we just see it as something that's in the past. We're more developed than that. We're not like that anymore. But projects like this, and even just examining ancient artwork, can really show that that is not quite the case, and can really provide us with a reflection on our own society.
Well, first of all, that was incredible. But I was wondering if you came across any responses, whether it was in a visual representation or a written representation, to some of the overlapping issues that might have been both ancient and modern, and whether those responses stayed constant or had different expressions of how they either interpreted or responded to what was depicted, either in writing or visually.
There are a number of responses for some of these themes. Some of them do tend to be, like some of these themes are actually a little bit more modern, like climate change. They didn't really talk about that quite as much back then. But a lot of people have done like political comics. I think variations of red figure that are like more modern. And a lot of them seem to kind of overlook the like keeping with the ancient themes part, and they kind of just modernize everything, which I think kind of takes away from the point of using these forms of artwork. But you do see a lot of these themes in especially extant literature from Rome specifically that really show the humanity and the universality of these themes.
We're doing mother-daughter tag team here on questions. I just love this project more and more every time you do an iteration of it. And one of the things that struck me this time, one was a more technical question in terms of your process of choosing the text. So if you could talk a little bit more about how you chose those and more about the texts themselves. The other one is a broader question that seems to be one of the kind of fundamental premises of this project is to both look at some of the commonalities you're talking about, the sort of universal human themes that you see across thousands of years, but also some of the disjunctures and the ways in which using a very different frame through the eyes of the ancients can disrupt what we think of as universal or natural in our contemporary times. And so I wonder if you could sort of just comment on how you see both of those kind of existing in your analytical frame, and also whether you came across there are issues of untranslatability in either textual form or kind of imaginative form. I'm thinking even about the word politics that lies at the center of this, right? Politics comes from ancient Greek, right? Or maybe something even before that. But does it really mean the same thing now as it did then?
That's a great question and an excellent point, especially there at the end. I think politics is such an ever-evolving concept, and I think that a lot of the technology we have these days has taken it like astray from the original meaning. I do still think that like the universality and the human themes are important. I haven't found a place yet in my studies in classics that is not applicable to the modern world in some way. Maybe I just haven't gotten there yet. If you can think of an example, please let me know. But to the part about picking texts, I actually was looking for texts that maybe aren't talked about quite as much. So one of the pieces I didn't discuss in this presentation is a confession inscription, which is essentially like an inscription written to a god who has supposedly punished a person, and it's like a formal and public apology. So those, while they are talked about in classics, especially if you have like a very niche field, aren't necessarily talked about like the way like the Iliad or the Odyssey are. So I was really going for things that maybe are a little bit overlooked, but still have a lot of overlap with modern society. Thank you.